Elara loved the quiet before the town woke up. It was a time when Havenwood, usually a gentle hum of bakeries and blacksmiths, held its breath, suspended between the cool indigo of dawn and the first blush of sunrise. She would unlock the heavy oak doors of the Havenwood Public Library, just as the sky began to bleed pale rose and gold, the scent of old paper and beeswax polish her private perfume. The library was her sanctuary, a labyrinth of stories and forgotten histories. Every book, every shelf, every sunbeam that slanted through the tall arched windows felt like a friend. Elara wasn't just a librarian, she was the keeper of Havenwood's collective memory, its whispered secrets bound in leather and cloth. Her fingers, usually stained with ink or softened by the dust of ages, traced the spines of first editions, a silent greeting to the voices within. Today, though, there was a different kind of whisper on the air, one that wasn't bound to the pages. It was a faint tremor of change, a subtle shift in the usual rhythm of Havenwood. For weeks now, an old dilapidated building on the edge of town, the former residence of the eccentric Miss Adelia Finch, had been undergoing a transformation. Scaffolding had gone up, then the rhythmic thud of hammers, the whir of saws. A new person had come to Havenwood, a quiet force of nature who seemed intent on reshaping a piece of its forgotten past. Elara had only caught glimpses of him. Tall, broad-shouldered, with hair the color of rich earth, and a gaze that seemed to miss nothing. He moved with a purposeful grace, even when hauling lumber or wrestling with recalcitrant beams. He wasn't loud, like some of the other contractors who occasionally worked in Havenwood, but his presence was undeniable. He was a whisper of strength, a silent promise of something new. She usually spent her mornings cataloging new acquisitions or meticulously repairing fragile bindings, the rhythmic ein-tump-thumpen of the date stamp, a comforting counterpoint to the town's waking. But this morning, her mind kept drifting to Miss Finch's old house. Rumor had it the man, a Mr. Rhys Kincaid, was turning it into a workshop and a home. A carpenter, they said, with a reputation for breathing life back into forgotten wood. Elara found herself wondering what kind of books such a man would read, what stories he would seek in her quiet haven. The library door chimed its cheerful, familiar tune just as the clock struck 10, signaling the official start of the day. Elara looked up from dusting the globe in the children's section, a faint smile on her lips, ready to greet Mrs. Henderson, who always arrived promptly for the morning newspaper. But it wasn't Mrs. Henderson. It was him. Rhys Kincaid. He filled the doorway, not in a way that felt intrusive, but rather as if the space had simply been waiting for him. He wore sturdy work trousers and a faded denim shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. There was a faint scent of sawdust and fresh wood about him, an earthy, masculine aroma that was utterly foreign and strangely captivating in the hallowed halls of the library. His eyes, the color of moss after a spring rain, swept over the towering shelves, a flicker of something unreadable in their depths. Elara felt a curious flutter in her chest, like a page caught in a sudden breeze. She straightened, smoothing the front of her sensible tweed skirt, acutely aware of the faint smudge of dust on her cheek. He seemed to hesitate for a moment, his gaze settling on her, and Elara felt a blush creep up her neck. He wasn't smiling, but there was no sternness either, just a quiet intensity that made her feel as if she were being catalogued, understood in a single comprehensive glance. "Good morning," Elara managed, her voice a little breathier than usual. "Morning," he replied, his voice a low rumble, surprisingly gentle for such a large man. He walked further into the main reading room, his heavy work boots making barely a sound on the polished wooden floor. He stopped at the large oak table in the center, his eyes still scanning the shelves. "I'm looking for something specific." "Of course," Elara said, moving from behind the circulation desk. "How can I help you, Mr. Kincaid?" He turned to her then, and for the first time, Elara noticed a subtle scar that arced just above his left eyebrow, a faint silver line against his tanned skin. It added a certain ruggedness to his otherwise calm demeanor. "Rhys, please," he corrected, a hint of a smile finally softening his lips. It was a subtle transformation, but it changed his entire face, making him seem less formidable, more approachable. "And you must be Elara. Everyone in town knows the librarian." Elara felt another blush. Being known was one thing, being known by him was entirely another. "That's me. What can I help you find, Whis?" "I'm renovating the old Finch place," he began, his gaze sweeping over the intricate carvings of a nearby bookshelf. "It's a beautiful old structure, but it's got some quirks. I've been trying to trace its history, especially some of the original architectural plans." Elara's eyebrows rose in surprise. "The Finch house? I don't think we have anything like that in the general collection. Miss Finch was quite private." "I know," Whis said, his eyes now fixed on a dusty, leather-bound volume on a high shelf. "But I heard a whisper that there might be some old town records, perhaps even property deeds or surveys, tucked away here. Something from a few generations back, perhaps relating to the original construction." A whisper. The word resonated with Elara. It felt almost like a personal invitation. "We do have an archives room," she admitted slowly, "for very old town documents. It's not usually open to the public without specific research requests. Most of it is, well, it's quite dry." "Dry is fine," Whis said, his gaze meeting hers, a spark of determination in his eyes. "I'm not looking for a novel. I'm looking for a foundation." Elara studied him for a moment. He wasn't asking for a sensational story. He was asking for truth, for the bones of a building, for history. There was an honesty in his request that appealed to her librarian's heart. "All right," she decided. "It's quite a trek. Most of those documents are unindexed, just boxes and boxes. It could take hours, days even, to find anything." A ghost of a smile touched his lips again. "I'm a patient man, Elara, and I'm good with my hands. I'm not afraid of a little digging." "Follow me then," she said, turning towards a narrow corridor hidden behind a false bookshelf. It was a secret passage, known only to her and the previous librarians, leading to the library's oldest, most sacred chamber. The archives room was a world unto itself. It smelled of parchment, aged wood, and a faint, sweet scent of forgotten lavender. Dust motes danced in the single beam of sunlight that pierced a high, grimy window. Row upon row of metal shelves held sturdy, unlabeled boxes, each one a potential treasure chest of history. A heavy, iron-bound door, usually kept locked, stood slightly ajar. Whis stepped inside, his broad shoulders seeming to fill the small space. He didn't speak, but Elara could feel his quiet awe. His eyes slowly scanned the shelves, a reverence in his gaze that pleased her. Most people found the archives intimidating or simply boring. "This is incredible," he finally murmured, his voice softer now, almost a whisper itself. He reached out a hand not to touch, but just to hover near a particularly ancient-looking box. "It is, isn't it?" Elara agreed, a warmth spreading through her chest. It was rare to find someone who appreciated this quiet corner of her world. "My predecessor, Miss Agatha, was a firm believer in keeping everything. Sometimes I think she kept things just because she felt important. And sometimes, those are the most important things," Whis said, turning to her. "The things that don't scream for attention but hold the most weight." Elara felt a jolt of understanding pass between them. He saw the beauty in the quiet, the value in the overlook. It was a connection she hadn't anticipated. "Where do you suggest we start?" he asked, gesturing to the daunting array of boxes. "Well," Elara began, walking to a section marked Property Deeds, pre-1900. "Miss Finch's house was built in the late 1880s, I believe. We'll want to look for original land grants, building permits, surveyor's notes from that period. It's a needle in a haystack, I warn you." "I've found smaller needles," he said, a glint in his eye. He pulled up a sturdy wooden stool, the only furniture in the room besides a small scarred table, and sat, indicating she should take the chair opposite. For the next few hours, they worked in comfortable silence. Elara, with her practiced eye, navigated the faded handwriting and archaic legal jargon, while Whis, with his strong, careful hands, opened dusty boxes, gently sifting through brittle documents. The air filled with the scent of old paper and the soft rustle of turning pages. It was a meditative rhythm, a shared quest. Elara found herself stealing glances at him. The way his brow furrowed in concentration, the quiet intensity of his gaze as he deciphered a particularly faint signature, the gentle manner in which he handled the fragile papers. He wasn't just looking for information. He was trying to understand the lives that had touched these documents, the hands that had built the house he was now restoring. "Here," Whis suddenly said, his voice cutting through the quiet. He held up a thick, rolled parchment, tied with a faded blue ribbon. "This looks promising. Havenwood Township. Lot 17. Finch Property. Original survey and architectural outlines 1887. Elara gasped, her heart giving a hopeful thump. "You found it. I can't believe it. I've never seen this before." She reached for it, her fingers brushing his as he handed it over. A spark, tiny but undeniable, flew between them. Carefully, Elara unrolled the parchment on the dusty table. It was a beautiful hand-drawn map, intricate and precise, depicting the original layout of the Finch property. But more than that, tucked into the roll were several delicate blueprints, architectural sketches of the house itself, complete with elevations and floor plans. They were faded, but still remarkably preserved, rendered in exquisite detail with fine ink lines and watercolor washes. Rhys leaned closer, his head almost touching hers, his breath warm against her ear. "Look at that," he murmured, his voice filled with genuine admiration. The original builder, Elias Thorne, was a true craftsman. See these details, the way the light would fall through the parlor window at dusk, the clever joinery in the porch beams. Elara saw it too. Not just the lines on the paper, but the vision behind them, the intent of the builder. She suddenly understood Rhys's passion. He wasn't just fixing a house. He was communing with its history, respecting its original soul. "He even designed a secret compartment in the study," Elara pointed out, tracing a faint, dotted line on one of the plans. "Just behind the fireplace. I never knew." Rhys let out a low whistle. "A secret compartment. Now that's a find. I'll have to look for that." He paused, then turned his head slightly, his gaze meeting hers. They were so close, Elara could see the flecks of gold in his moss-green eyes. "This is more than I could have hoped for, Elara. Thank you." His gratitude was so earnest, so direct, it disarmed her. She felt a warmth bloom in her chest, a feeling far more potent than the dust motes dancing in the light. "It's my job," she managed, trying to keep her voice steady, but her heart was doing a frantic little jig. "It's more than that," he countered softly, his gaze unwavering. "You knew where to look. You felt the whisper of it, didn't you?" Elara nodded, a shy smile gracing her lips. "I suppose I did." He held her gaze for another long moment, and Elara felt a strange pull, a sense of connection that went beyond their shared task. It was as if they had both recognized something vital in each other, something quiet and profound. Finally, he straightened, breaking the spell. "I'll need to borrow these, of course. I'll be very careful with them." "I know you will," Elara said, already retrieving a special archival folder from a nearby shelf. "Just make sure to bring them back when you're done. They're invaluable." "I wouldn't dream of keeping them," he promised, his voice earnest. "I'll return them personally, and perhaps I could tell you what I find in that secret compartment if there is one." Elara's smile widened. "I'd like that very much, Rhys." As he gathered the precious documents, he paused at the doorway of the archives room, turning back to her. The sunlight from the high window caught the dust in the air, creating a soft halo around him. "Thank you again, Elara," he said, his voice a low, sincere whisper. "You have a remarkable way of finding what's hidden." And with that, he was gone, leaving Elara amidst the quiet shelves, the scent of old paper mingling with the faint, lingering aroma of sawdust and something else, something new, exhilarating, and entirely unexpected. The library, her sanctuary, suddenly felt a little less solitary, a little more full of possibilities. The whisper of change was growing stronger, and Elara, for the first time in a long time, found herself listening intently. She had a feeling this was just the beginning of a very interesting story. The whisper of change was growing stronger, and Elara, for the first time in a long time, found herself listening intently. She had a feeling this was just the beginning of a very interesting story. Elara stood still, a lone figure in the suddenly too quiet expanse of the library, the scent of sawdust and fresh wood lingering like a phantom embrace. She traced the path Liam had taken, from the new empty space where the shelves would go, to the door that now stood ajar, letting in the faint, distant sounds of Willow Creek. The air, usually thick with the comforting stillness of old stories, now vibrated with an unfamiliar energy. It was as if a dormant seed had stirred within the library's heart, ready to sprout. Her fingers, still tingling faintly from where they'd brushed his, absently smoothed the spine of a nearby volume. Mr. Henderson, the previous librarian, a man who believed firmly in the unwavering constancy of things, would have disapproved of such a palpable shift in atmosphere. But Elara, despite her quiet nature and deep love for tradition, felt a thrill she hadn't known she was capable of. Liam's smile, the gentle crinkle at the corners of his eyes, the warmth in his voice as he spoke of wood and measurements, it all replayed in her mind, a vivid, unexpected reel. She moved through the aisles, not to reshelve or tidy, but simply to walk, to absorb the newness that had settled. The library, her sanctuary, her quiet haven, no longer felt quite so solitary. It felt poised, full of the promise of something more than just books. It was a strange, intoxicating feeling, like discovering a hidden garden within a familiar landscape. The next few days passed in a blur of anticipation. Elara's routine remained outwardly unchanged, the morning unlocking of the heavy oak doors, the methodical dusting of shelves, the quiet assistance to patrons, the meticulous cataloging of new arrivals. But beneath the surface a subtle current hummed. She found herself looking out the large arched window more often, listening for the rumble of a truck that wasn't the usual delivery van. She mentally rearranged the books that would fill the new shelves, not just by genre, but by how their colors and sizes might complement the warm wood Liam had described. Even Mrs. Gable, with her uncanny ability to sense the subtlest shifts in the town's emotional barometer, noticed. "You've got a spring in your step, dear," she'd observed one afternoon, her spectacles perched on the end of her nose as she checked out a stack of historical romances. "Must be those new shelves coming along." Elara had merely offered a small, shy smile, but a blush had warmed her cheeks. Mrs. Gable, with a knowing twinkle in her eye, had simply nodded. "Change is good, Elara, especially when it brings new things into our lives." Elara hadn't thought much about what new things Mrs. Gable might have been hinting at beyond the physical shelves, but the words echoed in her mind. Then one Tuesday morning, just as the sun was slanting golden through the high windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the quiet air, the rumble came. A deep, steady thrum that vibrated through the old floorboards. Elara, who had been meticulously aligning a row of biographies, felt her heart give a small, startled lurch. She smoothed her skirt, took a deep breath, and tried to appear as if she hadn't just been holding her breath for the past 72 hours. The library door swung open, and there he was. Liam, his broad shoulders filling the doorway, a canvas tool belt slung low on his hips, and a smile that seemed to effortlessly brighten the quiet space. Behind him, on the back of his truck, Elara could glimpse the rich honeyed tones of actual wood, beautifully planed and ready for assembly. "Morning, Elara," he said, his voice a low, pleasant cadence that always seemed to find a comfortable space in the library's hush. "Got your new editions ready for installation." "Good morning, Liam," Elara replied, her voice a little steadier than she felt. She gestured towards the empty wall. "They look wonderful, even from here." He walked in, carrying a long, sturdy plank of wood with an easy grace that belied its weight. The scent of fresh pine, mingled with a hint of something more exotic, perhaps cedar or oak, filled the air, replacing the lingering ghost of old paper. "It's reclaimed Douglas fir," he explained, setting the plank down carefully on a protective tarp had laid out. "Got it from an old barn upstate. It's got character, just like a good book." He winked, and Elara felt a familiar warmth bloom in her chest. For the next few hours the library transformed. The quiet hum of scholarly pursuits was punctuated by the rhythmic whir of a drill, the soft tap of a hammer, and the low murmur of Liam's occasional humming. He worked with an almost meditative focus, his movements precise and economical. Elara found herself drawn to watch him, captivated by the way his strong hands handled the wood, measuring, cutting, fitting, ketting. He seemed to understand the material intrinsically, coaxing it into shape, creating something beautiful and functional. She hovered, offering to move books out of the way, fetching him water, or simply standing by, observing. At first she felt a little awkward, unsure how to exist in the same space as this focused, capable man. But Liam, sensing her presence, would occasionally glance up, offering a quick smile or a brief explanation of what he was doing. "This piece here," he'd explained, holding up a beautifully planed shelf, is going to be the anchor. Needs to be perfectly level, otherwise you'll have leaning towers of literature. He chuckled, and Elara found herself smiling back, a genuine, unforced smile. Eventually, she found her courage. "Can I help with anything?" she asked, approaching him as he meticulously marked a spot on the wall. He straightened, wiping a stray strand of hair from his forehead with the back of a gloved hand. "Actually, you could. Could you hold this end of the level for me? Just tell me when the bubble's perfectly centered." Elara eagerly took the cold metal tool, holding it steady against the wall. "Centered," she announced, her voice precise, enjoying the small shared task. "Perfect," he murmured, making a mark. Their hands were close, and for a fleeting moment, she imagined the gentle brush of his fingers. The thought sent a pleasant shiver down her spine. As the morning wore on, their conversations grew longer, less about the task at hand and more about other things. Liam asked about her favorite books, genuinely curious, listening intently as she spoke of the magic of storytelling, the solace found in turning a page. "So, you're a fantasy reader then?" he asked, a drill momentarily forgotten in his hand. "Dragons and elves." Elara laughed softly. "Sometimes, but I also love historical fiction and a good mystery. Anything that transports you, really." "I get that," he mused, looking at the rows of books. "My work's a bit like that sometimes. Taking raw materials, seeing the potential, and building something new. There's a story in every piece of wood, if you know how to listen." Elara found this thought surprisingly profound. "I never thought of it that way," she admitted. "But it makes sense. You're not just building shelves, you're building homes for stories." He grinned, a warm, genuine expression that made her feel seen. "Exactly." Later, during a short break for lunch, they sat on the step outside, sharing the quiet hum of the town. Elara had packed a thermos of tea and some homemade oat cookies. Liam, who had brought a hearty sandwich, accepted a cookie with a grateful nod. "These are delicious, Elara," he said, savoring a bite. "You're a woman of many talents, it seems." Elara blushed, pleased by the compliment. "Just a quiet life, Liam. Books and baking." He looked out at the sleepy Main Street, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Nothing wrong with quiet. I spend a lot of time on my own out in the workshop. It's good for focusing, but sometimes you need a bit of connection too." He turned his gaze to her, his eyes warm and direct. "It's nice to have company while I work." Elara's heart fluttered. "It's nice to have you here," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. They talked about Willow Creek, its quirks and charms. Liam, it turned out, hadn't lived in the area his whole life. He'd moved back a few years ago to help his ailing grandfather, who had also been a carpenter. "He taught me everything," Liam said, a soft fondness in his tone. "When he passed, I just stayed, felt like home, in a way I hadn't felt in a long time." Elara understood that feeling perfectly. Willow Creek, and especially the library, had become her anchor after a period of upheaval in her own life, a quiet retreat from a world that had once felt too loud, too demanding. She didn't elaborate, but the unspoken understanding passed between them, a subtle thread weaving their shared experiences together. As the afternoon wore on, the first two sections of shelving took shape, standing tall and proud against the wall, sturdy and elegant. The warm wood glowed in the afternoon light, transforming the once empty space into a promise of future stories. Elara, watching Liam work, felt a growing sense of ease in his presence. The initial nervousness had given way to a comfortable camaraderie. At one point, as Liam was meticulously leveling a shelf, a small mischievous kitten, belonging to Mrs. Gable, wandered into the library, its tail held high. It darted between the aisles, a fluffy gray blur, before batting playfully at Liam's tool belt. Liam, startled, chuckled. "Well, hello there, little troublemaker." He knelt down, extending a hand, and the kitten, after a moment's hesitation, rubbed against his fingers, purring loudly. Elara watched, a tender smile gracing her lips. "That's Muffin," she explained. "She's Mrs. Gable's latest rescue. She's quite fond of visitors." Liam gently stroked Muffin's soft fur. "Seems she is. Smart cat knows a good scratch when she sees one." He looked up at Elara, a shared moment of simple joy passing between them. The way he interacted with the small creature, with such gentle patience, only deepened Alara's appreciation for him. It spoke of a kindness that extended beyond polite conversation. As the sun began to dip, casting long shadows across the floor, Liam stepped back, admiring his handiwork. "First 2 sections are solid," he announced, a note of satisfaction in his voice. "I'll be back tomorrow to finish the rest." Alara's heart, which had been steadily expanding with a quiet joy all day, felt a small, almost imperceptible pang at the thought of him leaving. "They're beautiful, Liam," she said, her gaze sweeping over the new shelves. "Truly, more than I could have imagined." He met her eyes, a soft, lingering look. "It was a pleasure, Alara. Really." He started to gather his tools, the easy rhythm of his packing creating a gentle farewell. "Same time tomorrow?" "Yes," Alara confirmed, perhaps a little too eagerly. "Same time." After he left, the library once again fell silent, but it was a different silence now. It was a silence filled with the ghost of laughter, the scent of fresh wood, and the memory of shared glances. The new shelves, standing proudly against the wall, were not just pieces of wood, they were tangible symbols of a burgeoning connection. They represented not just new space for books, but new space in Alara's heart, ready to be filled. She ran her hand over the smooth, warm grain of the wood, a quiet smile playing on her lips. Tomorrow, Liam would be back. And the story, her story, was far from over. It felt, in fact, like it was just beginning to find its rhythm. The morning light, filtered through the delicate lace curtains, painted soft patterns on Alara's bedroom wall. She awoke with a feeling of lightness, a subtle hum beneath her skin that had nothing to do with caffeine and everything to do with anticipation. The new shelves in her living room, she knew, were waiting. But it wasn't just the expertly crafted wood that brought the smile to her lips. It was the memory of Liam, his quiet focus, the scent of sawdust and fresh air that had lingered in her apartment long after he'd left. She rose, moving through her routine with an uncharacteristic spring in her step. Her usual morning contemplation, often a gentle drift through the day's tasks, was now punctuated by thoughts of his return. What would he say? Would he notice the books she'd already begun to arrange, carefully curating a new section dedicated to her favorite literary journeys? She found herself humming an old, forgotten tune as she brewed her tea, the melody a reflection of the gentle rhythm her heart now seemed to follow. After a quick breakfast, Alara stepped into her living room, and there they were. The shelves. Bathed in the soft morning glow, they looked even more impressive than they had last night. She traced the smooth grain of the wood, a tangible reminder of Liam's hands, his dedication. She'd spent an hour last night, carefully selecting the first few rows of books, well-loved classics, cherished first editions, a few obscure poetry collections. Each book felt like a small offering, a piece of herself placed on the stage he had built. It wasn't just about organizing. It was about curating a space that felt like home, not just for her books, but for the burgeoning hope in her heart. The bookstore hummed with its usual morning quiet when Alara arrived, the scent of old paper and fresh coffee a comforting embrace. Yet today, the quiet felt different. It was a space of waiting, of gentle expectation. She arranged a display of new arrivals, her fingers lingering on the spines, but her mind drifted. Would Liam come by early? Or would he wait until his usual afternoon coffee run? She scolded herself gently for the preoccupation. She had a bookstore to run after all. But the scolding was half-hearted, easily overridden by the pleasant flutter in her chest. By midday, the bookstore was busier, a steady stream of patrons browsing, sipping coffee, and exchanging quiet greetings. Alara was helping a customer find a rare edition of a botanical guide when the familiar chime of the bell above the door announced a new arrival. Her gaze almost instinctively lifted. There he was. Liam Dye. He stood just inside the doorway, a canvas tool bag slung over his shoulder, a hint of sawdust clinging to his worn jeans. His eyes, warm and steady, met hers across the room. A soft smile touched his lips, and Alara felt a blush rise to her cheeks, a warmth spreading through her. "I'll be right with you," she murmured to the customer, her voice a little breathier than usual. Liam nodded, a silent acknowledgement, and moved towards the small cafe counter, ordering his usual black coffee. He leaned against the counter, seemingly casual, but Alara noticed the way his gaze kept returning to her, a quiet question in their depth. When she was finally free, she walked towards him, a genuine smile lighting her face. "Liam, good morning." "Alara, good morning to you too," he replied, his voice a low, comforting rumble. "How are the shelves settling in?" "Perfectly," she said, her eyes sparkling. "They're absolutely perfect. I spent most of last night and some of this morning arranging books. It's like they were always meant to be there." He took a sip of his coffee, his gaze thoughtful. "Good to hear. I was hoping they'd fit right in." He paused, then added, "Did you find everything you needed, spacing-wise?" "More than enough," she assured him. "It's amazing how much difference a little thoughtful design makes. My apartment feels lighter somehow, more open." He smiled, a genuine warm smile that reached his eyes. "That's the goal, to make a space feel more like you." The simple phrase, "more like you," resonated deep within Alara. It wasn't just about the shelves. It was about him seeing her, truly seeing her, and crafting something that reflected her essence. "Thank you, Liam. Truly." "My pleasure," he said, his gaze lingering. "So, any new treasures you've unearthed to fill them with?" Alara laughed softly. "Oh, a few. I've started a whole new section for my more whimsical poetry, and a display of my favorite travel narratives for those armchair adventurers." "Whimsical poetry, huh?" He mused, a hint of curiosity in his voice. "Sounds intriguing. Perhaps I could recommend one for your next coffee break," she offered, a boldness she hadn't known she possessed surfacing. "I'd like that very much," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He finished his coffee but made no move to leave. Instead, he leaned back against the counter, his presence a comforting anchor in the bustling bookstore. They talked for a while longer, about the changing seasons, the quiet joy of a well-made object, the surprising beauty found in unexpected places. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by comfortable silences, and Alara found herself sharing snippets of her life, her thoughts, with a natural ease she rarely experienced. Over the next few weeks, Liam's presence in Alara's world became a gentle, unwavering constant. His visits to the bookstore transitioned from a quick coffee stop to longer, more leisurely interludes. The coffee and cookies tradition became sacred. He would often arrive just as the afternoon lull settled, carrying a small brown paper bag from the bakery down the street, always with Alara's favorite lemon shortbread cookies, which he'd somehow intuited she loved. They would sit at the small round table by the window, the soft light illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, and talk. Their conversations deepened, moving beyond books and carpentry to the landscapes of their lives. Alara learned about Liam's passion for woodworking, not just as a trade but as an art form. He spoke of the quiet satisfaction of transforming raw timber into something beautiful and functional, of the stories he imagined each piece would tell in its new home. He talked about his grandfather who had first taught him the craft, and the feeling of connection he found in carrying on a family tradition. In turn, Alara found herself opening up about her own deep-seated love for stories. She spoke of how books had been her companions through quiet years, how they offered solace, adventure, and understanding. She told him about the first book that had truly captivated her, a worn copy of Anne of Green Gables inherited from her mother, and how it had sparked her dream of owning a bookstore. Liam listened with an attentiveness that made her feel truly heard, his gaze steady and warm, never rushed or dismissive. He asked thoughtful questions, prompting her to delve deeper, to articulate feelings she hadn't consciously acknowledged before. One rainy Tuesday, a small leak developed in the old bookstore roof, dripping ominously onto a display of new fiction. Before Alara could even call a repairman, Liam, who happened to be there for his afternoon coffee, sprang into action. He quickly assessed the situation, found a bucket, and within an hour had fashioned a temporary patch that held until a professional roofer could be called. He refused payment, saying simply, "Happy to help a friend." The word friend settled between them, warm and solid, like a cornerstone. Alara, watching him work, noticed the confident grace of his movements, the strength in his hands, and the quiet determination in his eyes. He was practical and grounded, yet there was an artistic sensibility to him, a respect for materials and form. She saw him not just as a craftsman, but as a creator, someone who brought beauty and order into the world. He in turn began to understand the quiet rhythm of Ilara's life. He would notice the way her eyes lit up when a child discovered a new picture book, or the gentle patience with which she guided an elderly customer through the poetry section. He saw the subtle humor in her observations, the depth of her empathy. He started recommending books to her too, not the literary fiction she usually gravitated towards, but books on traditional crafts, on the history of furniture, or on the philosophy of creation. Ilara found herself surprisingly drawn to them, discovering new facets of understanding, new ways to connect with Liam's world. One crisp autumn afternoon, as leaves began to paint the streets in fiery hues, Liam found Ilara meticulously dusting a shelf of antique globes. "You know," he said, holding his steaming mug, "I'm working on a commission piece for the new art gallery downtown. They're doing a showcase of local artisans next month, and I'll have a small display. I was wondering, would you be interested in coming with me to the preview night?" Ilara's hand paused mid-dust. Her heart gave a little flutter. An invitation. A step beyond the comfortable confines of the bookstore and her apartment. She hadn't been to an art gallery in years, and certainly not to a preview night. Her social circle was small, her evenings usually spent curled up with a book. The idea felt both exhilarating and a little daunting. "Oh," she breathed, turning to face him. "A preview night? That sounds wonderful, Liam. I'd love to." A genuine smile spread across his face, and Ilara felt a wave of warmth wash over her. "Great," he said, his voice soft. "It's next Friday evening. I'll pick you up if that's all right." "That would be lovely," she confirmed, a blush rising. The week leading up to the gallery preview was filled with a gentle hum of excitement for Ilara. She found herself browsing online for appropriate attire, something she hadn't done in ages. She even picked up a new lipstick, a subtle berry shade that made her feel a little more confident. It wasn't just about the event itself. It was about stepping out, about sharing a part of Liam's world, and allowing him to share hers. When Friday evening arrived, Ilara was a bundle of nerves and quiet anticipation. She chose a simple, elegant dark green dress, the color of deep forests, and paired it with delicate silver earrings. She felt a little like a character in a novel, embarking on a new chapter. Liam arrived precisely on time, looking surprisingly dashing in a dark blazer over a crisp shirt, his usual easygoing charm elevated by the slightly more formal attire. He held a small bouquet of wildflowers, their vibrant colors a cheerful contrast to the autumn evening. "For you," he said, handing them to her, his smile warm. "Oh, Liam," Ilara gasped, touched. "They're beautiful. Thank you." The gesture, so thoughtful and unexpected, melted away a layer of her nervousness. The drive to the gallery was comfortable, filled with easy conversation. Liam explained a little about the pieces he would be showcasing, 2 intricate wooden sculptures inspired by natural forms. He spoke of the challenge of translating a fleeting idea into solid wood, of the hours spent shaping and refining. Ilara listened, fascinated, gaining a deeper appreciation for his craft and his dedication. The gallery was abuzz with activity, a soft murmur of voices, the clinking of glasses, and the gentle strains of jazz. Ilara, usually preferring quiet spaces, found herself surprisingly at ease with Liam by her side. He introduced her to a few fellow artisans and gallery owners, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back as he did so, a touch that sent a pleasant shiver down her spine. She felt a quiet pride as he pointed out his sculptures, beautifully lit and commanding attention. They were abstract yet organic, imbued with a sense of movement and life that spoke volumes of his talent. "They're magnificent, Liam," she whispered, genuinely impressed. "They feel alive." He turned to her, his eyes shining with a mixture of pride and something softer, more personal. "That means a lot, Ilara. Coming from you, it truly does." They spent the evening wandering through the gallery, discussing the art, sharing observations, and simply enjoying each other's company. Ilara found herself laughing more freely than she had in years, her usual reserve melting away under Liam's gentle presence. He made her feel seen, appreciated, and utterly comfortable. He didn't demand, he simply offered. Later, as they stood by a large window, looking out at the city lights, Liam turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "You know, Ilara, I've always found beauty in the quiet things. The way light catches on a grain of wood, the silent strength of an old tree. And you You have that same kind of quiet beauty, a depth that you don't always show, but it's there like a hidden treasure. Elara's breath hitched. His words, so gentle and sincere, touched a place deep within her that had long been guarded. She felt a vulnerability, a raw openness, but it wasn't frightening. It was exhilarating. That's a beautiful thing to say, Liam. He reached out, his fingers lightly brushing hers, a spark passing between them. I mean it. The evening ended with a late-night cup of tea at Elara's apartment. The new shelves, now fully adorned with books, seemed to gleam softly in the lamplight, silent witnesses to the unfolding connection. They sat on her comfortable sofa, the quiet intimacy of the moment a stark contrast to the lively gallery. Thank you for tonight, Liam, Elara said, her voice soft. It was truly wonderful. The pleasure was all mine, Elara, he replied, his gaze warm and steady. I enjoyed seeing your reaction to everything. It was good to share it with you. As he prepared to leave, he paused at her doorway. There's a small antique market next Saturday just outside of town. I sometimes find interesting pieces of wood or old tools there. Would you perhaps like to join me? We could grab some lunch too. Elara's heart swelled with a quiet joy. Another invitation, another step forward. I would love that, Liam, she said, her smile genuine and radiant. He smiled back, a warmth emanating from him that filled the small hallway. Great, I'll pick you up around 10. After he left, Elara stood by the window for a long moment, watching his car disappear down the street. The quiet of her apartment, once a comfort, now felt imbued with the echoes of his presence, the warmth of his words. She touched her fingertips to her lips, remembering the brief, electric touch of his hand. Her heart, once so carefully guarded, now felt remarkably open, a space ready to embrace the rhythm of a story that was still very much in its early, beautiful chapters. The path ahead felt wide and inviting, promising more shared moments, deeper understanding, and a gentle unfolding of a love story she hadn't dared to dream of. The path ahead felt wide and inviting, promising more shared moments, deeper understanding, and a gentle unfolding of a love story she hadn't dared to dream of. The very next morning, a soft tap on the bookstore door roused Clara from her thoughtful stupor. Liam stood there, a lopsided grin on his face, holding 2 steaming mugs. Good morning, Clara. Thought you might appreciate a little caffeine kickstart, and maybe a walk? Clara's smile was immediate and genuine. Liam, you're a mind reader. Come in. They walked through the quaint streets of Willow Creek, the morning mist still clinging to the historic lampposts, turning the world into a soft focus painting. They talked about everything and nothing, the quirky history of the town, the books Clara was currently reading, Liam's latest photography project capturing migratory birds along the coast. He spoke with such passion, his eyes lighting up as he described the way light caught a heron's wing, or the intricate patterns of a spiderweb dusted with dew. Clara found herself mesmerized, not just by his words, but by the sheer joy he found in the world. Their walks became a ritual. Sometimes they'd venture further afield, into the whispering woods that bordered Willow Creek, Liam pointing out rare wildflowers or the tracks of elusive deer. Clara listening, learning, seeing the familiar landscape through his appreciative eyes. Other times they'd simply stroll through town, stopping for ice cream or browsing the antique shops, their hands brushing and intertwining, a natural comforting fit. Clara discovered a quiet strength in Liam, a steadfastness that grounded her. He was patient, never pushing, always observing, always present. He listened with an intensity that made her feel truly heard, her thoughts and feelings valued. She found herself sharing snippets of her past, the quiet solitude she'd embraced after a difficult friendship had ended, the way her bookstore had become her sanctuary. He didn't offer platitudes or try to fix anything. He simply acknowledged her experiences, his gaze warm and understanding. One rainy afternoon, they found themselves curled up on the old velvet armchair, in Clara's living room above the bookstore, a pot of tea between them. Rain lashed softly against the window panes, creating a soothing rhythm. Liam was showing her photographs on his laptop, breathtaking landscapes, candid wildlife shots, portraits that captured the soul of their subjects. He paused on a particularly striking image of a lone lighthouse against a stormy sky. This one, It reminds me of you somehow, he murmured, turning his gaze from the screen to her. Clara's breath hitched. May? Why? He traced the outline of her jaw with his thumb, a feather-light touch that sent shivers down her spine. Strong, beautiful, a beacon, standing firm against whatever the world throws at it, yet holding so much warmth and light inside. Her heart fluttered. No one had ever described her like that. She, who often felt small and unremarkable, suddenly saw a glimmer of the person he saw. In that moment, surrounded by the comforting scent of old books and the gentle sound of rain, he leaned in. His lips were soft, hesitant at first. Then more confident, a tender inquiry. Clara met him, her own lips parting, a wave of sweetness washing over her. It was a kiss that tasted of tea and rain and unspoken promises, a gentle affirmation of the deepening connection between them. Their first kiss opened a new door, not just to physical intimacy, but to an even greater emotional vulnerability. Holding hands became natural, a comforting anchor. Lingering hugs became a silent language of affection. Clara found herself anticipating his visits, her days brighter just knowing he was near. Liam started helping out in the bookstore on slow afternoons, not just as a customer, but as a companion. He'd organize shelves, chat with patrons, even suggest new titles for her nature photography section. He seemed to fit seamlessly into her world, and Clara found herself wondering how she'd ever managed without his quiet presence, his infectious enthusiasm. One evening, after helping her set up a display for a local author event, Liam leaned against the counter, a thoughtful expression on his face. Clara, I have an opportunity coming up. A magazine wants me to do a feature on the wild horses of Assateague Island. It would mean being away for a couple of weeks, maybe 3. Clara's stomach did a little flip. 3 weeks. It wasn't forever, but the thought of his absence, after just beginning to grow accustomed to his presence, brought a pang of unease. Her old fears, of connection leading to eventual loneliness, stirred. She tried to keep her expression neutral. That sounds incredible, Liam. A fantastic opportunity. He studied her face, his gaze perceptive. It is, but I wanted to tell you personally, and to say that I'll miss you, a lot. He reached across the counter, taking her hand. His thumb stroked her knuckles. It's not a goodbye, Clara, just a pause, and I'll call, of course, every day. His sincerity melted her initial apprehension. This wasn't an abandonment. It was his passion, his calling. And he was including her in his plans, acknowledging her place in his life. I'll miss you too, she admitted, a soft smile finally gracing her lips. But go, capture those wild horses. I'll be here, keeping the fort and waiting for your stories. The weeks Liam was away were a testament to how deeply he had woven himself into the fabric of her life. The bookstore felt a little emptier, her mornings a little quieter. But his calls were a lifeline. He described the salty air, the thundering hooves, the challenging light, and the immense satisfaction of his work. He'd ask about her day, about the customers, about her latest book. He even sent her a small, beautifully framed print of a sunrise over the dunes, a promise, she thought, of future dawns shared. When he finally returned, Clara found herself practically running to meet him at the edge of town, a rare burst of impulsiveness. He stepped out of his car, looking a little windswept and tired, but his eyes lit up when he saw her. He dropped his gear and pulled her into a tight embrace, burying his face in her hair. God, I missed you, he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. Clara clung to him, inhaling the familiar scent of him, fresh air, a hint of sea salt, and something uniquely Liam. I missed you too, she whispered, her voice a little shaky. This reunion, the sheer joy of it, confirmed what her heart had been telling her. This was real. His return marked a new phase in their relationship. The comfort and familiarity deepened, allowing for a more profound intimacy. They began to talk about their futures, not just individual dreams, but shared possibilities. Liam spoke of wanting to establish a permanent gallery in Willow Creek, a place where he could showcase local wildlife and landscapes, perhaps even teach photography workshops. Clara, in turn, found herself daring to dream bigger for her bookstore, envisioning author readings, literary clubs, a true community hub. You know, Liam said one evening as they sat on her porch swing, watching the stars begin to pepper the darkening sky. "I've been thinking, your bookstore, it could be more than just a place to buy books. It could be a gathering spot, a creative space. What if we hosted a photography exhibition? My work, local artists. It would bring new energy, new people." Clara's eyes widened. A photography exhibition? In my bookstore? The idea was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. Her bookstore was her safe haven, her quiet retreat. But Liam's enthusiasm was infectious. "It's bold," she admitted, a smile playing on her lips. "But I love it." They spent weeks planning. Liam curated a stunning collection of his own photographs, serene forest scenes, dramatic coastal shots, and intimate portraits of wild creatures. He also reached out to local artists, transforming the bookstore into a vibrant gallery space. Clara, in her element, organized the logistics, refreshments, and spread the word. The entire town buzzed with anticipation. The opening night was a resounding success. The bookstore was filled with people, laughter, and admiring whispers. Liam, usually so reserved, glowed with pride as he explained his work to eager guests. Clara, usually content to fade into the background, found herself confidently chatting with visitors, her heart swelling with pride for Liam, and a new sense of accomplishment for herself. She watched him across the room, his eyes catching hers, a silent message of shared triumph passing between them. In that moment, surrounded by the beautiful art and the vibrant energy, Clara realized how much she had grown, how much he had helped her open up to the world. The exhibition ran for a month, bringing a fresh wave of customers and turning Clara's quiet haven into a bustling cultural center. It also showed them how beautifully their passions could intertwine, how they could complement and elevate each other's dreams. As autumn painted Willow Creek in hues of gold and crimson, Liam and Clara found themselves falling into a comfortable, deeply loving rhythm. They cooked together in her small, cozy kitchen, walked hand in hand through piles of crunchy leaves, and spent quiet evenings reading aloud to each other, sharing their favorite passages. One blustery Saturday, as they sat by the fireplace in her living room, a mug of cider warming her hands, Clara looked at Liam. He was sketching in a small notebook, his brow furrowed in concentration, but a soft smile played on his lips. She felt a profound sense of peace settle over her, a feeling of finally being home. "Liam?" she began, her voice soft. He looked up, his pencil pausing. I love you." The words, unspoken for so long, felt light and true as they left her lips. They were not a declaration born of passion or urgency, but a quiet, steady truth that had simply found its way to the surface. Liam's eyes softened, a warmth spreading through them that mirrored the fire crackling beside them. He put down his notebook and took her hands in his. "Clara," he said, his voice a low, tender rumble. "I love you too, more than I ever thought possible." He leaned forward and kissed her, a kiss that was both gentle and deeply committed, a silent promise of forever. The following months unfolded like the pages of a beloved novel, each chapter bringing new depths and discoveries. They explored the surrounding regions, Liam capturing stunning landscapes and Clara finding inspiration for her own quiet thoughts and observations. They met each other's families, Liam's warm, boisterous clan who welcomed Clara with open arms, and Clara's more reserved but clearly approving parents who saw the newfound sparkle in their daughter's eyes. One crisp spring morning, Liam asked Clara to meet him at their favorite spot, a secluded bench overlooking the winding river just outside of town. The air was fresh with the scent of budding leaves and damp earth. Clara arrived to find him already there, a thoughtful expression on his face. He stood as she approached, taking her hands. "Clara," he began, his voice a little shaky, his usual calm demeanor tinged with nervousness. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box, intricately carved with a delicate leaf pattern. Clara's heart began to pound a joyful rhythm against her ribs. He opened the box to reveal a ring, not a sparkling diamond, but a simple, elegant silver band, intricately carved with tiny, intertwining vines and leaves, echoing the natural beauty they both cherished. "Clara," he said, his gaze unwavering, full of love and earnest hope, "you are the most beautiful, kind, and courageous woman I know. You've opened my eyes to a new kind of quiet joy, and you've opened my heart in ways I never imagined. My life has been richer, brighter, more meaningful since you walked into it. I can't imagine a future without you by my side, sharing every sunrise, every whispered story, every quiet moment. Will you marry me? Will you write the rest of our story with me? Tears welled in Clara's eyes, tears of pure, unadulterated happiness. Her voice was thick with emotion as she managed to whisper, "Eyes. Oh yes, Liam, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, a symbol of their bond, of the life they were building together, rooted in love and shared dreams. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and they stood there for a long time, simply embracing, the sounds of the river and the gentle spring breeze, their only witnesses. Their wedding was a small, intimate affair in the garden behind the bookstore, filled with close friends and family. The air was fragrant with blooming roses and the scent of old books. Clara wore a simple, elegant ivory dress, and Liam looked dashing in a linen suit. Their vows were heartfelt, simple promises of love, support, and shared adventures. Life after the wedding settled into a beautiful, comforting rhythm. Clara's bookstore, now also home to Liam's small, exquisite gallery of local photography, thrived. They hosted book clubs, photography workshops, and poetry readings, turning the space into a true heart of the community, a testament to their combined passions. Their home above the bookstore became a sanctuary, filled with the warmth of shared meals, the quiet rustle of turning pages, and the soft clicks of Liam's camera as he worked on new projects. They still took their morning walks, still shared cups of tea, still found endless joy in the simple act of being together. One evening, years later, Clara sat on the porch swing, a well-loved book open on her lap, but her gaze was fixed on Liam. He was tending to the small garden they had cultivated, his hands gentle as he pruned a rosebush. His hair was a little grayer at the temples now, and there were a few more lines around his kind eyes, but he was still the same steady, loving man she had fallen so deeply in love with. He looked up, catching her gaze, and offered her that familiar, lopsided grin. "What are you reading tonight, my love?" he asked, his voice a warm balm. Clara smiled, a deep, contented smile that reached her eyes. "Just the usual, our story, Liam, and it's my favorite one of all." He walked over, wiping his hands on his trousers, and settled beside her on the swing, drawing her close. She leaned her head on his shoulder, the comfortable weight of his arm around her. The stars were beginning to emerge, twinkling like scattered diamonds in the indigo sky. Just as they had on that night, she first realized her love for him. The path ahead was no longer wide and inviting in an unknown way. It was wide and inviting because it was paved with their shared memories, their dreams, and their unwavering love. Clara's heart, once so carefully guarded, was now not just open, but overflowing. It beat in perfect sync with Liam's, a steady, comforting rhythm, a testament to a love story that had bloomed from a chance encounter in a quiet bookstore, growing stronger and more beautiful with every passing chapter, promising an endless, heartwarming tale, perfect for a lifetime of sweet dreams.